kind of in relation to what I talked about last week when we were talking about think about what you're thinking. You actually think about why you're thinking what you're thinking and so on. I think we also need to figure out why we allowed ourselves to be distracted in the first place. Like, why is it that we sought out distraction instead of reading the book that we wanted to read? Why is it that we spent 2 hours scrolling through TikTok?
Yeah.
Why did we make that choice? I think that's important, because if we're able to figure out why we're making these decisions, then it will help us to safeguard against making mistakes like that in the future. Welcome to the Hacker Podcast.
Today we're continuing our conversation from episode 72, where we talked about modern day distractions. We dive deep in how to get back on track and what to do when you feel stuck.
Make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review the show if you are able to. That really helps us get the podcast out to more people. Finally, we want to encourage you to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe.
Now let's get back to the conversation. Welcome back to Australia, Greg.
It's good to be back. I was just over in the States for a couple of weeks. Yeah. The last episode we actually recorded over there at my dad's house, and couldn't figure out the camera settings with you not being there. So I was kind of stuck on an island and ended up looking a bit yellow, but hey, it is what it is.
I thought it was all the food you were having. I was like, oh, man.
Oh, bro, every time we go to the States, it's like a food tour,
Yeah.
To be honest, and not to offend any Americans out there, but the food isn't actually better than what we get here in Australia.
Yeah.
But it's just like nostalgic. It's all these foods that I've had my
Yeah.
whole life growing up. So it's like, I'm going to have Chick-fil-A.
Right.
Whether it's great or not, it's probably not as good as some of the chicken places we have here, but it's Chick-fil-A. So I haven't had it, and all these different restaurants that I've got to check out. And of course I went to Kansas City, so crushing the barbecue.
all the
phenomenal.
all the family meals that you probably had as well.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it's nice to crush barbecue that you don't have to cook for 5 hours or 9 hours. Somebody else did that, and then you just pay them money, and and it's better than what I can make. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's good to be over there. First time in a while.
Yeah, so last time you were here, we talked about distractions.
Yeah, we went into modern day distractions
Right.
and things that can really hold us back. We got the phones. That's something easy that we can refer to that distracts us. But that was episode 72. And if you haven't listened to or watched that, we do encourage you to go back and check that out. Maybe hit the pause button here, go back to 72, listen to that, and then come back here. But you will get a lot out of this episode, even if you haven't heard that one. So,
Right.
But briefly, what we talked about is they changed it. They basically, over time, they've changed the definition of distraction. Words change definitions all the time.
Yeah.
But we went back and we looked at like what the definition of distraction was in 1953, and it was basically talking about how distractions are things that people actually seek rather than things that happen to them.
Right.
The way we view distraction nowadays is that that's something that's happening to me. Like my phone happens to me.
Right.
It's distracting me. The phone
Right.
is. But in reality, what distraction is we often seek that distraction out. I'm actively going to my phone
Right.
to get distracted from something else. I want to be distracted.
Right. I
And
remember you saying that it was an object that
Yeah.
normally yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And instead of it just being something else that's the one doing it to me, I'm actually the one that's choosing to be distracted. And I think that's very key for this discussion. Everyone needs to understand that, because that's really going to be what we dive into here today. And we talked about Proverbs to wrap up this little recap.
Yeah.
But we talked about in Proverbs 4, where it says that we need to focus our eyes on a path, to look ahead and make sure that we have fixed our eyes on what's ahead of us, and not allowing things that are distracting us from the right or from the left, front or behind. We're focused on where we want to go.
Right.
And I think that brings us back to, I think that sort of ties in everything that we talked about in that episode.
Yeah.
But if you want to hear the full discussion, definitely encourage you to check that out.
Right. But to dive deeper on distractions, right? What do you do when you get distracted?
Yeah, so we talked like broadly about distraction, but we didn't actually talk about what happens if you are distracted, because
Right.
we all get distracted. We all make that mistake. We seek out distraction, and I think kind of in relation to what I talked about last week when we were talking about think about what you're thinking. You know, you actually think about why you're thinking what you're thinking and so on. I think we also need to figure out why we allowed ourselves to be distracted in the first place. Like, why is it that we sought out distraction instead of reading the book that we wanted to read? Why is it that we spent 2 hours scrolling through TikTok?
Yeah.
You know, why did we make that choice? I think that's important, because if we're able to figure out why we're making these decisions, then it will help us to safeguard against making mistakes like that in the future.
So you're saying like a some sort of self-reflection, right?
Yeah, I think it's important that we reflect on the decisions that we're making. And a good example of someone who allowed themselves to be distracted that's in the Bible is Lot. You know, he saw the plains outside of Sodom and Gomorrah, the well-watered plains, and he saw, hey, that's going to be a great place for my family. That's going to be great for us to prosper. But he got distracted from the calling that God had given to Abraham and to Abraham's family, you know, the blessings that God had in store for them. And he saw that distracted him from it. And obviously we can see what happened to him in the end. He ends up in Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's not a good result because he allowed himself to be distracted. So yeah, like, why are you allowing yourself to be distracted in the first place? Is it laziness? Is it frustration? Is it a fear of failure, a fear of inadequacy? Is it, do you feel like you're going to be rejected if you actually step out and do this thing? So I think there's a lot of layers to why we seek out distraction. It's not just like, oh, I was tired, or, oh, you know, I just like Instagram so much.
Yeah.
I think there's layers to it. And sometimes we can sabotage ourselves. So we need to make sure that we're not doing that to ourselves. We're not in a mindset of self-sabotage. And so if we can figure that out, why we are seeking distraction, that will, like I said, allow us to safeguard against it in the future. And if you have become distracted, there is hope for you. You know, I don't want people to think that just because they've been distracted or they're going through a season where they've allowed themselves to get off track, because today we're talking about getting on track. I don't want them to feel like, you know, there's no hope. And that's the reason for this episode today. That's why we're tackling this subject. Proverbs 24:16, it says, "For a righteous man falls down 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in time of calamity." So a righteous person, he'll fall down 7 times, but he gets back up again. Another version puts it this way. It says, "The godly may trip 7 times, but they will get up again." So you may have tripped, you may have allowed yourself to get distracted, but it's time to get back up. It's time to dust yourself off and refocus your eyes on the path. You know, get your eyes fixed on that path that is straight ahead of you. That was, we talked about in Proverbs 4. But it's so much easier said than done to refocus, to dust yourself off, because of how it can make you feel when you discover that you've gone into a space of being distracted.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's often that we might feel upset, you know, that we didn't use our time wisely. And, you know, that realization is I feel like it's a complex one, right? Because depending on who we are, we can either feel motivated at that point in time, or depending on, you know, again, who we are or what situation we're in, we might even seek more distraction. We might even indulge in more distraction, right?
That's so true.
You know, if we go to episode 72, we talked about all the different distractions in the modern day. And there's a lot of moments where we can feel stuck and feel unmotivated and all these different things. And
the other thing was also in that episode, we referenced that not all distractions are necessarily bad things.
Right.
You know, and we can seek out things that are actually good,
right,
but is robbing us from what God really has for us, you know. And yeah, that's so key. And the thing that you mentioned about how that there's different types of people. Like there's some people that when they recognize that they've made these mistakes, they will dive deeper into that and just like, I've failed, or or I've allowed myself to be distracted. So who cares? I'm just going to keep, it's like someone who's, was on a diet and then they ended up failing on that diet. And so instead of fixing it, instead of saying, oh, that was a bad day, I'm going to get back into the gym. I'm going to get myself back focused. They actually like, oh, well, I messed up. So diet's off. I'm going to go back to eating,
It's like, if I can't do it perfectly, then there's no reason for me to do it. And that's not how we should, see it. It's just another opportunity of just getting back on the track,
we can't be perfectionists. Like, no one's going to live a perfect life, right?
Right. And, sometimes it could be the fact that, if you mess up, you start identifying yourself as a failure. And I firmly believe that, we shouldn't call ourselves a failure when we fail to be distracted, right? I think they're two different things. Although we can consider it failing, we shouldn't, we're all Christians, and when we start identifying ourselves as failure, it goes against our values and especially as what God calls us to be, first and foremost. So, it's important just to move past failure and start making strides. And that definitely takes, like you said, a bit of self-reflection, a bit of understanding why you're doing it in the first place.
That's so key, man. Like, especially like even when talking about parenting, you never label your child something.
No.
They may have made a mistake,
right?
But there's a difference between a kid who's being cheeky and then just saying you're a bad kid or you're a cheeky kid.
Yeah.
Right. And then now they live into what you have told them. And oftentimes we do that. Like, if we call ourselves a failure, we're going to live into that failure.
Right.
We're going to choose to be a failure every day because we've told ourselves we're failures.
Right.
And as you said, there's a vast difference between someone who makes a mistake or fails than someone who is going to label themselves a failure. That's so key. So we've talked about getting to the root of why we're distracted, understanding that, and what can be the end result if we allow that to happen, but also not labeling ourselves as failures. I think we should look at what are some tips that the listener or the viewer can take with them. What are some tips that we can give them onto how to get back on track if they've allowed themselves to be distracted?
Yeah, I think from episode 72, after all those statistics that you threw at us, I think one of them is removing some of those distractions, right? That's why fasting is good.
Yes.
That's why just period of not being on your phone is good. I mean, that's probably, just putting it in a separate room, just focusing on, just certain things, because there's so many devices out there.
Yeah.
And there's so many just avenues of distraction that you can take.
Delete some apps that might be,
that's huge,
like Netflix, or if you're binging on that, or Instagram. Right. If you find yourself spending too much time on there, or TikTok, it's like a black hole. It just
screen
sucks
time
you
if
in.
you have an iPhone. Screen time.
Oh man, I
huge.
tried that. It's so funny. I think we talked about this before. I think it was actually in the last distractions episode.
Oh yeah.
But I've got the screen time thing, and I just ignore it every time.
I've actually gone down on mine since that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think I'm at like 2.5 hours now. Which is,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Well, look at you.
I know.
Actually, taking stuff that we talk about here and putting into practice, unlike me over here on the other side. But yeah, as you said, remove remove those things out of our lives. Right. If they're the ones that are sucking us in, if we're getting to the point where we're allowing ourselves to be distracted, then you remove yourself from that, get away from it. Another one I think is to refocus on your purpose.
Yeah.
Why is it that you're here? Why is it that you're doing what you're doing? And one thing that I've noticed that's really helped me focus in the past is if I find myself getting off track a little bit in what God has called me to do, man, if you put your hand up to join a small group, lead a small group, or teach a Bible study, nothing will get you focused like realizing every single week you've got a Bible study that you need to teach, you need to prepare for it. And also, you're getting your hands dirty in the kingdom of God, helping someone be discipled, helping someone draw closer to Jesus. That can really refocus you on the purpose that God has for you.
Yeah, just getting uncomfortable, absolutely.
Do you have another one?
Yeah. What about a healthy routine, right? But incorporating spiritual aspects to it. So
yeah. Like we listen to those podcasts that go through all these routines. I think actually Huberman, they were interviewing Andrew Huberman, and he actually goes through his entire routine. They actually asked him that question.
Right.
I saw that. I was like, that's amazing. I could never do that, but super cool.
Yeah. That's, oh man. So I think, you know, they always say if you have a place and a time to do something, chances are you'll stick to it.
Yeah.
So that's whether that's praying, whether that's reading your Bible, whether that's, you know, working out. Yeah, it could be anything.
Because
right?
those disciplines are important. We heard
Right.
that from Sister Marshall,
Right.
you know, Dr. Vonnie Marshall, when she was talking about mental health. You know, one thing that really helps our mental health is our physical health. If we're healthy, that's going to help us be healthy mentally.
Right.
And I think it also will feed into our spiritual well-being as well.
Yeah. Do you want to have I think we have a few more, maybe?
You got a couple more? Yeah, there's one here I've got. It says, evaluate your workload.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that the reason you're choosing to be distracted is because you're facing the dreaded burnout.
Yeah, that's huge.
And many times in ministry, we kind of just plow through all of that
Right.
because we've got a world to save, and Jesus can't save the world without us, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're the hands and feet of Christ, so that's important. But, you know, if you are actually burnt out, you're no good to anyone really when it comes to ministry.
True.
You know, you're not a failure if you put your hand up and say, I need a bit of a break. And so it's important that you evaluate yourself there, you know, and that gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning, figuring out why we're allowing ourselves to be distracted. There could be a very real reason that we need to work through, that we need to actually set time aside and get healthy.
Right. And I think, we have one more. You kind of hit on it a little bit with, you know, just with the Bible study, going out and trying something new that realigns with our purpose. But lastly is taking a step of faith, right? You know, be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, just going out there. There's going to be moments where you can do and reach out and just have that Bible study with someone, ask them, you know, and doing those sort of things will only take that time away where you can't be distracted. You know, when you step in those moments, there's no, you know, after you do that, you what are you going to do? You know?
Like get busy about the things of God, and that will definitely help you to stay on mission, or help you to stay focused.
Right.
You know, people that are hyper successful, they don't have a lot of free time.
Right.
And the reason they don't have a lot of free time is because their time is filled up with doing things, accomplishing things, you know. And the same relates to those who, you know, are people that we look up to in a spiritual sense. Their lives are full. They're not, you know, you don't have these people that we look up to. They're not just sitting around on their phone all day. I doubt Mark Morgan is just cruising through Instagram every night for 2 hours. Or, you know, I think I was talking to in the interview that we had with Brother Harold Hoffman, who's one of my favorite preachers. He talked about every night he's reading, and he's constantly reading books, and he's reading dozens of books a year, and all different types that are going to help him with ministry, or going to help him with his development. And so he has a focus, he has an intention on where he wants to be, and how he believes that God's going to use him. So I think that's good. And also the one that's really famous is Brother Bernard. Have you ever seen his Facebook post when he goes through the amount of books that he's read in a year? It's insane.
I've seen one of them.
Yeah.
It's great.
Every time I see that post, I'm like, I'm going to read at least one book a month this year.
Yeah.
And thank God for Audible, because that's helping me accomplish that. But yeah, I think those tips are good. Obviously, there's more things that we could say there, but practical tips, you know, refocus on your purpose. Remove the things you have allowed to distract you. Have a healthy routine that includes spiritual disciplines. Evaluate your workload. Think about, you know, why you're distracted. Is it for a real reason that is causing you these issues? And then take that step of faith. You know, step out and do something for God. And we want to leave you with this final encouragement from Psalm 37. We put this in the script. I took it out of the script, and we weren't going to do it, and then I snuck it back here at the end. I just love this passage, Psalm 37, verses 23 to 24. And it says, "The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives." Think about that. He delights in every detail of our lives. He directs our steps. He's the one that's putting the pieces together in our life. And it finishes by saying, "Though they stumble," this is the righteous, "though the godly stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand." And we can trust in that. We can put our faith in that even though we may get distracted, even though we might find ourselves veering off of where God actually wants us to go, if we maintain that relationship with him, if we continue to walk with him, even though we stumble, we're not going to fall, because he's right there. He's going to help us. He's going to be that one that holds us by the hand, that takes us on this journey with him. So I want to leave you all with that you may have allowed yourself to be distracted. You may not be exactly where you want to be in life, or maybe in 2022, you might not have accomplished all the goals that you have set yourself out to do. But today's the day. You can get back on track. You can start striving again for the prize. You can fulfill the purpose that God has for you, that the plan that God has for your life. You can do great things for God. So get back on track and accomplish what God has for you today.